Imagine waking up 100,000 years ago. The air is cold. A small fire crackles in front of your camp. Around it, families prepare food, repair stone tools, and tell stories through gestures and sounds. Thick gray smoke rises into the night sky. Your eyes burn. You cough. Every instinct tells you to move away from it. Today, millions of people willingly inhale smoke. But for almost all of human history, smoke wasn't something people wanted inside their lungs. It was something they escaped from. So what changed? When did our ancestors stop avoiding smoke and begin using it on purpose? For pleasure? For medicine? For religion? Or is the truth stranger than we imagine? The answer takes us through thousands of years of archaeology, ancient ritual, and one of humanity's most surprising discoveries. Long before cigarettes, long before tobacco, and even long before written history, smoke already held a strange place in human life. Just not in the way you probably think. The first relationship humans had with smoke wasn't about smoking at all. It was about surviving. Researchers believe our ancestors began controlling fire at least several 100,000 years ago, though the exact timeline is still debated among archaeologists. Fire changed everything. Warmth on freezing nights, protection from predators, cooked food, hardened wooden spears, a center for every camp. But fire always came with a price: smoke-filled caves and shelters. Without chimneys or ventilation, early humans breathed smoky air daily. Archaeologists studying ancient hearths have found heavy smoke residue on the walls and ceilings of prehistoric dwellings, evidence of just how constant this exposure was. Modern research shows that prolonged wood smoke exposure can damage the lungs and irritate the eyes, and many scientists believe early humans likely dealt with similar effects. If they could step away from the smoke, they probably did. So the earliest humans weren't smokers. They were survivors living beside smoke. But survival has a way of teaching unexpected lessons. And that's where our story continues next. Over generations, people likely began noticing that different plants smelled different when burned. Some woods seemed to keep insects away. Certain leaves gave off pleasant aromas. Others produced thick clouds that helped preserve meat by warding off flies. Smoke stopped being just a byproduct. It became a tool, and none of these discoveries required anyone to inhale it on purpose. They simply required paying attention, an ability that would go on to shape almost everything else humans built. Eventually, smoke took on another role entirely: communication. Long before radios or written messages, controlled smoke could carry information across distance. Many historical cultures later used smoke signals to warn allies, announce arrivals, or share news. Direct evidence from the earliest prehistoric humans is limited, but it shows how deliberately people had learned to shape and use smoke by the time recorded history begins. Perhaps the biggest shift, though, happened inside the human mind rather than outside the body. Humans search for meaning. A flame dancing in the dark draws the eye. Rising smoke twists and changes shape by the second, disappearing into the sky. It isn't hard to imagine why ancient people connected it with mystery, spirits, or unseen worlds. Many archaeologists believe symbolic thinking, expressed through cave paintings, carved figures, decorated burials, and ritual objects, expanded significantly tens of thousands of years ago. Smoke likely entered that symbolic world too, not because anyone craved nicotine, but because they wanted connection. To each other, to the unknown, to something larger than survival. That search for connection would soon turn smoke into something far more powerful and far more sacred. Across many ancient societies, burning fragrant plants became part of ceremony. Resins, herbs, and aromatic woods released scent during gatherings, healing rites, or funerals, and that smoke may have represented purification, protection, or a bridge to the ancestors. This is a very different act from smoking. The goal wasn't inhaling, it was creating an atmosphere. Frankincense and myrrh are among the most famous examples. Aromatic resins valued for thousands of years across the ancient Near East and Africa, filling temples with fragrant smoke during religious ceremonies that appealed to the senses and the emotions at once. Ancient Egyptians burned incense daily in their temples. In India, aromatic smoke became woven into spiritual traditions that continue today. In China, incense accompanied meditation and ancestor worship. Different civilizations, working independently, kept arriving at the same idea. Smoke became sacred, yet deliberate smoking, intentionally drawing smoke into the mouth or lungs, appears to emerge much later, and for that story, we travel to the Americas. Unlike Europe, Asia, or Africa, the Americas were home to wild tobacco species, and indigenous peoples gradually discovered that tobacco had properties unlike ordinary plants. Archaeological and chemical evidence suggests tobacco use in the Americas may stretch back over 10,000 years in some regions. Although scholars continue to debate the exact dates and how early practices differed from later ones, these early communities weren't rolling cigarettes though. Tobacco held deep spiritual significance, used in ceremony, healing, diplomacy, and communication with the spiritual world, guided by cultural knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. Pleasure wasn't always the primary purpose. Meaning often was. Other plants with psychoactive properties appeared in different cultures too. Some eaten, some brewed into drinks, some burned in ritual. These practices varied enormously by region and should never be flattened into one universal human story. But this careful, sacred relationship with tobacco was about to collide with the rest of the world. Then, beginning in the late 1400s, everything changed. European explorers reached the Americas and encountered tobacco for the first time. Sailors carried it back across the Atlantic, and what had been a sacred plant tied to specific cultural traditions spread rapidly across Europe, Asia, and Africa within a few centuries. Pipes became fashionable. Cigars appeared. Eventually, manufactured cigarettes turned smoking into one of history's largest commercial industries, and, along the way, the original meanings behind tobacco were largely stripped away, replaced by status, recreation, and addiction. Modern science would later reveal the serious health risks linked to tobacco use, including cancer, heart disease, and chronic lung illness. Dangers no ancient civilization could have understood the way researchers do today. In a strange way, humanity's relationship with smoke had come full circle. Our earliest ancestors spent their lives trying to escape harmful smoke wherever they could. Millennia later, entire societies began intentionally embracing one very specific kind. Looking back across thousands of years, one thing becomes clear. Humans didn't begin by smoking. They began by observing. They watched fire. They experimented with plants. They discovered preservation, protection, fragrance, and symbolism, and, eventually, ritual. Smoking wasn't the beginning of humanity's relationship with smoke. It was the final chapter of a much longer story. A story about curiosity, about adaptation, about the very human ability to turn something dangerous into something meaningful. The next time you see smoke rising into the air, remember, it carries a history far older than tobacco, older than cities, older than civilization itself. Before humans ever smoked anything, they first had to understand fire. And that single discovery changed the course of human history forever.